If you had told me 10 years ago that my so-called perfect American family was built on a lie so outrageous it makes daytime soap operas look like documentaries, I would have laughed, poured myself a Bud Light, and gone back to mowing the lawn. But here I am, standing on the wreckage of what I thought was a marriage, trying to figure out how the hell my wife managed to choreograph the longest-running Betrayal Broadway show right inside my living room. Everyone always thinks the first cracks in a marriage come quietly. Missed anniversaries, forgotten flowers, the occasional cold shoulder. Not mine. Mine came wrapped in casserole dishes from our friendly neighbor, the same guy who kept borrowing my power tools and never returning them. And apparently, he borrowed more than that. My wife swore she loved me, told me every night that our family was her anchor, her reason to breathe, the American dream we'd built together. Little did I know that under the smiling Christmas cards and the perfect Instagram posts, she was harboring a toxic love affair that would one day make Maury Povich look like the prophet of truth. You are not the father? Oh, trust me, I found that out in 4K. The irony is, I wasn't suspicious at first. I was that classic suburban husband, mowing the lawn on Saturdays, grilling burgers in the backyard while the kids splashed in the inflatable pool, waving at the neighbor across the fence like we were living in a commercial for toothpaste. My wife played the role of the perfect mom, soccer practice chauffeur, PTA volunteer, birthday cake baker. She made everything look so normal that I ignored the little whispers inside my head, those faint alarms that said, "Hey man, why does the neighbor spend more time fixing your sink than you do?" But of course, I silenced that voice with faith in my marriage vows. Because family was sacred and betrayal was something that happened to other people. Not to me, not to us. But America loves irony almost as much as it loves reality TV, and my story was about to turn into both. At first, it was the jokes my coworkers made. "Man, your kid looks just like your neighbor." They laughed, slapped me on the back, and I laughed too, because what else do you do? You don't take those comments seriously. Until you can't unsee it. Until you look at your own son's smile and realize it's a carbon copy of the guy next door who just so happens to have the same dimples. And suddenly, every barbecue feels like a conspiracy, every neighborhood watch meeting like an episode of The Twilight Zone. I started connecting dots the way paranoid people do. Her phone always on silent, her sudden interest in jogging at night, the way she brushed off my questions with the confidence of a politician caught in a scandal. "You're imagining things," she'd say, flipping pancakes in the morning like she wasn't secretly rewriting the definition of infidelity right there in our kitchen. And I, like a fool addicted to denial, kept swallowing it. I told myself I was overthinking. After all, cheating was what happened in movies, in tabloids, to celebrities with yachts and prenups, not to a small-town guy with a mortgage and 2 kids who called him dad. But here's the thing about toxic love and betrayal. It doesn't care about zip codes. It doesn't care about wedding vows or bedtime stories. It slithers in, hides under the everyday routines, until one day you're standing in your driveway, staring at your neighbor and wondering if he's laughing because he knows something you don't. And that thought alone starts to eat you alive. I became the detective of my own misery, noticing every slip, every sideways glance, every whispered laugh they thought I couldn't hear. I started feeling like the star of a conspiracy thriller, only without the cool soundtrack. And the worst part? My wife played her role flawlessly, smiling, loving, convincing me that family came first, while behind the curtain the play was about betrayal and cheating and lies that stretched over years. Looking back, I should have seen it sooner. But that's the twisted beauty of infidelity. It blinds you with the illusion of love. You want so badly to believe that what you built is real, that your children are truly yours, that your wife is still the woman you married, that you ignore the red flags waving like American banners on the 4th of July. I didn't just miss the signs, I bulldozed right through them. And maybe that's why, when the truth finally came out, it didn't just sting, it detonated. It turned my whole life into a parody of itself, the kind of story that makes strangers shake their heads and say, "Man, that's brutal." So if this sounds dramatic, remember, this is only the beginning. Because the day would come when I held the DNA test in my hands, the proof that my kids, my entire legacy, weren't biologically mine, and that my neighbor was more than just the guy borrowing my tools. He was the father. And in that moment, every Sunday cookout, every neighborhood smile, every whispered doubt collapsed into a single word that echoed in my head: revenge. You know that old saying, once you see it, you can't unsee it? That became my life motto the moment I realized every family photo hanging in my hallway was basically a billboard for betrayal. The dimples, the eyes, even the way my kids chewed their food, it all screamed neighbor. I swear, every time I grilled burgers in the backyard, I could hear the theme music of some crime documentary in my head. It was like my whole life was being narrated by the guy from Dateline. My wife kept acting like everything was fine, like our marriage was a Norman Rockwell painting, but the cracks were there, and they were spreading faster than gossip at a PTA meeting. I tried to ignore it at first, because denial is the cheapest therapy you can buy. But every little thing started to gnaw at me. Her phone suddenly had a password. She'd disappear for yoga class, and yet somehow came home looking like she'd just run a marathon through toxic love itself. And don't even get me started on the neighbor. That man suddenly had the confidence of a guy who knew something nobody else did. His smile lasted too long, his jokes about family felt too sharp, and he had this way of waving at me like, "Hey buddy, thanks for raising my kids." I swear, I started imagining him wearing a crown in my living room, ruling over a kingdom I didn't even know I lost. Now, here's where the conspiracy theories start to make sense. You see, once doubt sets in, your brain turns into a detective agency run by paranoia and caffeine. I started building timelines, tracking her errands, even checking the mileage on the car like I was working for the FBI. And the more I dug, the crazier it got. Did you know she and the neighbor both suddenly became dog people around the same time? We didn't even own a dog. But there they were, talking about breeds and leashes like it was code for something else. Maybe it was. Maybe golden retriever meant something I'll never be able to say out loud. And here's the punchline. I tried to confront her once, just casually, over dinner. I said, "Hey, doesn't it seem like we've been spending a lot of time with the neighbor lately?" And she, without missing a beat, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "That's because he's part of our community. He's like family." Family. That word hit me like a sucker punch, because if betrayal had a brand ambassador, it would be her saying family while cheating with the guy next door. At this point, I started losing it. Not outwardly. You don't want to give away your suspicions too soon, but inwardly, I was spiraling. Every smile, every text, every grocery trip became evidence in my imaginary courtroom. I pictured the jury shaking their heads, the judge slamming the gavel, my wife standing there guilty of the worst kind of infidelity. And me, I was the fool who ignored the signs. I should have been preparing my revenge speech, but instead I kept hoping I was wrong. But America loves its drama, and my neighborhood was about to get a front row seat. One night I was out back taking the trash cans to the curb when I saw it. My wife's silhouette in the neighbor's kitchen window. Not our kitchen. His. They were laughing, leaning close like a Hallmark movie gone horribly wrong. I stood there frozen, gripping a trash bag like it was a weapon, realizing the woman I married was starring in her own late-night comedy show next door. And I wasn't invited. That's when the anger started to eclipse the denial. I wasn't just hurt. I was humiliated. Imagine walking into Sunday service at church, shaking hands with people who probably already suspected your whole marriage was a sham. Imagine living in a neighborhood where every smile from the mailman felt like pity. This wasn't just cheating. This was betrayal on a community level, the kind of scandal people whisper about for years. And worst of all, my kids, my innocent, unsuspecting kids, were caught in the middle of this toxic love triangle that should have been buried in some bad Lifetime script. So I started plotting. Not out loud, of course, but in my head, revenge scenarios became my coping mechanism. Maybe I'd expose them at the next block party, stand on a picnic table with the DNA results, and scream, "Ladies and gentlemen, meet the real father of my children." Or maybe I'd do something quieter, like leak the truth anonymously and watch the fireworks explode on their own. Every idea was darker than the last, but every idea gave me a tiny spark of control in a world where I suddenly had none. Still, I needed proof. Solid, undeniable, courtroom-quality proof. Because if I was wrong, if I blew up my marriage on a hunch, I'd be the crazy husband everyone warned her about. So I did what any rational man in my shoes would do. I decided to test the bloodlines. The DNA test became my holy grail, the one way to prove that my suspicions weren't just paranoia. And the day I ordered those kits online, I swear I felt like I was pressing the nuclear launch button. Because once you start down that road, there's no coming back. You either expose the betrayal or you confirm your own worst nightmare. Either way, the family you thought you had is gone forever. There are a lot of moments in life you never forget. Your wedding day, the birth of your first child, maybe even the first time you tasted freedom after graduating college. But let me tell you something. Nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to the moment you rip open a DNA test envelope and realize your entire family tree has been pruned and replanted in the neighbor's yard. The day I got those results back, it was raining. Of course it was raining. The universe loves adding special effects when your life is about to implode. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the envelope like it was Pandora's box, knowing that inside was either salvation or destruction. My wife walked past, humming some cheerful tune, flipping pancakes for the kids, and I thought, God, this is the kind of breakfast scene they put in commercials for maple syrup. Except the commercial didn't end with me clutching DNA results that screamed betrayal louder than a rock concert. I opened it slowly, carefully, like if I tore the paper too fast, maybe the truth wouldn't hurt so much. And there it was, in clinical cold language, 0% probability of paternity. Not for one child, not for two, for every single kid who called me Dad. My hands went numb. My ears rang. I remember thinking, this must be a typo. Maybe the lab mixed up my samples with somebody else's. But then I saw the next line. Comparison with alleged father, the neighbor. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. That's when the world tilted. I swear I saw stars in my kitchen at 10 o'clock in the morning. My legs gave out, and I had to grab the table just to keep myself from collapsing like a bad soap opera character. My entire identity, husband, father, protector of this family, wasn't just under attack, it was obliterated. My kids, my legacy, weren't mine. They were his, the guy who still had my leaf blower sitting in his garage. I looked over at them, my children, my blood in every way that mattered except the literal, and they were laughing, pouring syrup, making a mess of their cereal. Innocent, oblivious. And suddenly the cruelest part of infidelity hit me. Betrayal doesn't just shatter you, it shatters the illusion you thought was love. Because those kids weren't guilty of anything. They didn't ask to be born into a toxic love triangle that had been masquerading as a family sitcom. And yet, here they were, smiling at me with the neighbor's dimples stamped across their faces like a cosmic joke. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm into the neighbor's house, shove the papers in his face, and demand revenge on the spot. But instead, I sat there in silence, sipping coffee, like I wasn't living inside the world's darkest parody. My wife noticed nothing. That woman could have won an Oscar for how effortlessly she carried on, like she wasn't guilty of the biggest cheating scandal since Bill Clinton. In my head, though, the conspiracy reel started spinning. I imagined neighborhood block parties where everyone else already knew, where I was the only idiot grilling hot dogs while they whispered about how the kids really take after the neighbor. I pictured the neighbor raising a beer in a silent toast every time he looked at me, thinking, "Thanks for babysitting my children, pal." Maybe the whole subdivision was in on it. Maybe the HOA meetings were just cover-ups for their laughter at my expense. It was madness, but it felt real. That's what betrayal does. It makes even the wildest theories sound plausible. The absurdity of it all didn't escape me. Here I was, a suburban dad turned unwilling contestant on some twisted game show called Who's Your Daddy? Spoiler alert, not me. I half expected Maury himself to burst through my sliding glass door yelling, "You are not the father," while the neighbor did a victory dance on my deck. But beneath the sarcasm, the anger brewed. The betrayal wasn't just a fling. It was years of lies, years of infidelity, years of me investing love, time, and money into a family that wasn't biologically mine. That's not just cheating, that's identity theft at a generational level. My wife didn't just betray me, she rewrote my DNA story without asking permission. And that's the kind of toxic love that demands consequences. Revenge fantasies consumed me. I pictured myself holding a press conference on the front lawn, inviting every neighbor, every coworker, every PTA mom to witness the unveiling of the truth. I imagined spray painting "cheater" across the neighbor's garage door in big red letters, then mailing photocopies of the DNA results to every mailbox on the block. Maybe I'd even hire a skywriter to spell out betrayal over the cul-de-sac during the 4th of July fireworks. Dramatic? Yes. Satisfying? Absolutely. But then the fear kicked in. Because what do you do when your entire identity as a father has been ripped away? Do you keep pretending for the sake of the kids? Do you burn it all down in a fiery spectacle of revenge? Do you pack a bag and vanish, leaving behind the wreckage of a family that was never really yours? That's where I sat, in limbo, in the eye of a storm, made of betrayal, toxic love, cheating, and the cruelest irony fate could deliver. And as much as I wanted to collapse, to surrender to the humiliation, I knew the confrontation was coming. The showdown, the reckoning. Because you can't hide infidelity forever, and you can't bury the truth once DNA has spoken. And trust me, when that day came, when I stood face to face with my wife and the neighbor, it wasn't going to be a quiet conversation. It was going to be war. Confrontation isn't as glamorous as movies make it look. There's no dramatic background music, no perfect one-liner that destroys your enemy. It's messy, loud, humiliating, and in my case, it smelled like burnt chicken because I picked the absolute worst moment to expose the truth. Family dinner. I slammed the DNA results on the table between the mashed potatoes and the gravy boat. My wife blinked at me, fork halfway to her mouth, while the kids stared like they were watching a live episode of Jerry Springer. My voice shook, but the words came out sharp. Care to explain why the neighbor's DNA matches our kids better than mine? Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Then came her tears. Of course, the waterworks. She whispered, "I never meant to hurt you," which is hilarious because betrayal isn't exactly an accident. You don't just trip and fall into infidelity for years on end. I wasn't having it. I laid out every suspicion, every late-night yoga class, every laugh I'd overheard through the neighbor's window. She tried denial, but the DNA results were right there, glowing like radioactive proof. Eventually, she cracked, admitted to the affair, admitted to the years of lies. And the worst part? She didn't even look ashamed. She looked relieved, as if carrying this secret had been a burden and now she could finally breathe. Meanwhile, I was choking on the ashes of the life I thought we had. The next part was inevitable. I stormed out of the house, crossed the lawn, and pounded on the neighbor's door like a cop in a crime drama. He opened it with that smug smile, the same one I'd seen 1,000 times. Only this time, it wasn't friendly. It was victorious. I shoved the papers at his chest and shouted, "Congratulations! You're the father!" And he had the audacity to smirk and say, "Well, I always did feel close to your family." That was it. That was the line that broke me. Rage boiled over, revenge fantasies turning into reality. I grabbed his front yard flamingo decoration and hurled it across the lawn like a javelin. He threatened to call the cops. I dared him to, and soon the whole neighborhood was outside watching like it was the Super Bowl halftime show. People recording on their phones, whispering, gasping. Suddenly, my humiliation was public property. If betrayal is a wound, then public spectacle is the salt poured straight in. But something strange happened. As I stood there, chest heaving, reputation in flames, I realized the revenge wasn't satisfying. Screaming at my cheating wife, humiliating the neighbor, it didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't give me back my family. It just made me another character in the circus. And that's when the absurdity hit me. My whole life had become a parody. A sitcom gone off the rails. I was the butt of the joke in a story about infidelity and toxic love, and the laugh track was the sound of my neighbor's whispers. So I did something unexpected. I stopped yelling. I stopped throwing things. I looked my wife in the eye and said, "You've destroyed everything we built. You chose lies over loyalty, infidelity over family, betrayal over truth. And I'm done." Then I walked away, not because I was weak, but because real revenge isn't about flamingos or front yard shouting matches. Real revenge is living better, moving on, and letting their toxic love collapse under its own weight. The divorce came fast. Lawyers got involved, custody battles ensued, but the DNA results spoke louder than any argument. Legally, the kids weren't mine. That fact gutted me more than anything. I'd raised them, loved them, kissed scraped knees, cheered at soccer games. And now, with one clinical test, I was erased from their story. That's the cruelest part of betrayal. It doesn't just steal your partner, it steals your identity as a father, a husband, a man. Months later, when the dust settled, the neighbor and my ex-wife tried to play house together. But toxic love never lasts. They fought, they broke up, and soon she was left standing alone, reputation shredded. The neighborhood that once whispered behind my back now whispered about her. Karma, some would call it. Revenge served cold. As for me, I rebuilt, slowly, painfully. I found new routines, new peace. I learned that family isn't always about DNA. It's about love, loyalty, truth. And while infidelity had stolen years of my life, it hadn't destroyed me. In a strange, twisted way, betrayal gave me clarity. It showed me who I was when everything else was stripped away. Looking back, I sometimes laugh at the absurdity of it all. The DNA test, the neighbor's smirk, the flamingo showdown, it's almost too ridiculous to be real. But it was real, and it taught me this. Cheating can break your heart. Betrayal can wreck your family. Toxic love can poison your home. But revenge isn't about destroying them. It's about refusing to let their lies define you. So here I am. Not the man I was before, but stronger, sharper, and maybe just a little funnier about it all. Because if you can't find humor in the ruins of betrayal, then the betrayal wins. And me, I refuse to let infidelity have the last laugh.